out the details of that in Genesis 2. And when God created the humans, it says this. It says, God formed a man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. And the man became a living being. This same breath that God used to breathe life into all of the world, into creation, and that had the power to make the world that we have today, it's the same breath that God breathed into us so that we could have life. And it's with that breath that we're able to speak and communicate. God has given us such a powerful and important tool. And we have to realize that it's a gift from God. And that when we speak and when we use our words need to be a reflection of the same power that God used when he created the earth and when he created life and when he brought forth all the things that we have. When I'm not here at the church, I work as a kindergarten aide for Huntsville City Schools. And each year I get to watch as these 4 and 5-year-olds come to school not knowing a whole lot about how to say, learn, read, and things like that. And so I get to work with them as they learn their letters and their sounds. And I get to help them as they put together their letters to make words and their words to make sentences. And at this age, they pay such close attention to everything that they're saying because they want to make sure that they say it right. They'll reread words over and over again to make sure that it's the right pronunciation, that it sounds right, that it's the right word to use. They pay so much attention. And while we don't really have to think so much about how we say our words or the pronunciation of our words, we should be paying that close attention to what we say as well. We should be taking the time to think about what we're saying. And we've all experienced the effect that our words can have on our lives. We've felt that power in our own lives. Maybe you can remember a time when someone spoke something into your life and it made you feel good and confident and it gave you joy. And in the same way, maybe you remember a time when someone spoke something into your life and it brought pain and it brought sadness. And just in that same way, think about the times in your life when you've spoken words of hope and joy and happiness into someone's life, and the times when you've spoken words that might have been hurtful. There are two sides of our words. There's the side that can bring life, and the side that can bring hope and joy, and then there's the side of words that bring death. And in our world today, there's so many people who are suffering and facing issues like depression and anxiety and issues of self-worth. We hear story after story about kids and teenagers and even adults who are suffering from bullying or verbal abuse. All over the world, our words are being used in a very, very powerful way. But sometimes that power is not being used for good. When I was a freshman in college, my school's theater department was putting on a show that was dealing with some very controversial issues. And our school was notified that during the opening week of the show, there would be a protest by Westboro Baptist Church across from our school to protest the show. And if you don't know who Westboro Baptist Church is, they're the group that goes around protesting a lot of different places and a lot of different things, and they hold up signs that say that God hates just about everyone and just about everything. And so the opening week came, and they showed up across the street, and they had their signs in their hands. And on this particular day, God hated my school, God hated Oklahoma City, and God hated all these different groups of people. And while they never spoke a word, their signs and the words on their signs were so powerful and so full of judgment and so full of hate. And as a community, we felt that so deeply. We felt hurt and scared and confused, and we just didn't understand. And it was damaging for some people. And while the words we speak may not be that harsh, we have to realize that our words have the potential to be that harsh and to be that hurtful. And so in order for us to know how to speak and which ways are good and which ways are bad, we have to recognize the words in our lives that can bring this pain and to bring death. Some of those types of words include gossip. When we talk about the lives of other people or the things that we hear someone else saying and we pass those along, we're spreading gossip and we're spreading rumors and we're spreading lies that can be hurtful and that they aren't ours to share. Words that bring death like judgment. When we think that we know how people should act and how they should behave and what they should do and what they should say, and we make those judgments on people, we're hindering them and we're not giving them the chance to be who they are. When we speak too harshly, it's easy to forget about the tone of our voice and the way that we communicate with one another. I've done this in my life many times. If my husband was here, you could ask him that sometimes I will react very quickly to things and I will speak with a sharpness or a tone of voice that's not necessarily nice. And that can be hurtful. Even if the words were not intended to be hurtful, the tone can make a huge difference. Sometimes we speak words that are overly critical. We want to help each other grow. We want to help each other become better people. But when we're overly critical of one another, instead of helping us grow, we're pushing each other back down. So we have to be careful when we're critical. Words that bring death are words that we use when we lie. When we lie, we're breaking trust. We're putting a wall up with the relationships of the people around us. Our words can bring death when we're argumentative. Sometimes when we're in the heat of a moment and we're frustrated and we're angry and we have all these emotions going through us, we say things that we don't mean or say things that we shouldn't say at all. And those words can be so hurtful. And finally, it's simply when we speak negatively. It's probably one of the easiest ways to bring words of death into our lives is when we speak about things in a negative way. And we just spread that negativity to everyone around us. In Proverbs 12:18, it says, "The words of the reckless pierce like swords." We don't want our words to be reckless. We don't want our words to be hurting or piercing or cutting down the people around us. We want our words to bring life. And so we need to be careful and considerate about the way that we're speaking and the way that we're communicating. And as we speak and as we communicate and we use our words, we need to make sure that they're going back to that original intention that God had, that they would bring life and that they would bring hope. Jesus used words in his ministry all the time. We can read about all the different things that he said and all the different things that he did. His words brought healing. His words performed miracles. His words opened the hearts and the minds of the people around him through his stories and his parables. And in Luke 24, we read about a story of two of Jesus' followers who are traveling on a road on their way to a place called Emmaus. And at this point in time, Jesus has died. And he's resurrected, but nobody has seen him yet. No one has experienced Jesus, and so they don't really know what's happened. And so these followers are traveling, and they're discussing this, and they encounter a man on the road who ends up to be Jesus, but at first they don't recognize it. It says, "Now that same day, 2 of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. And as they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them. But they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, 'What are you discussing together as you walk along?' 'About Jesus of Nazareth,' they replied. 'He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people.'" So these followers of Jesus, they're traveling and they encounter this man who is Jesus, but they don't know it. And he wants to know what they're talking about. He wants to know what's been going on. And so they tell him about what has happened, how Jesus has died, and now they can't find him, and they don't know what to think. And they tell Jesus that this man that they follow is a powerful, powerful person. But they don't describe him first through his actions or his deeds, but first by talking about his words. The first thing they say is he was a prophet. A prophet is someone who speaks forth or speaks out about things. He's powerful in word. Jesus' words had had a profound impact on his followers, and these 2 people were just confirming that. That's what that called them to Jesus then, and that's how they describe him. And so, as I said, they're confused at this point in time because they don't know where Jesus is at. They don't know what's happened to the body, but it's not there, and they're trying to figure it all out, and they're doubting. And they're beginning to forget all the things that they'd heard about what was going to happen to Jesus. And Jesus responds to them by saying, he said to them, "How foolish are you, and how slow to believe all that the prophets have spoken? Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter his glory?" And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in the scriptures concerning himself. So Jesus explains to them and goes back over all the history and all the prophecies and all the details of what he had told them before about what was to come. And he reminded them of those words. And as they traveled along, they got to a point where they could go to Emmaus or keep going, and Jesus began to keep going, and they begged him to stay. And so Jesus came along with them, and when they reached the place they were going, it says that they sat down. And when he was at the table with them, he took bread, gave thanks, and broke it, and began to give it to them. Their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. And they asked each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he talked to us on the road and opened the scriptures to us?" Through Jesus' conversation with these followers and through his explanation of the scriptures, these followers were able to have hope again. They were reminded of the truth, and they had begun to doubt, but now they knew that their doubts were not right, and that the truth was that Jesus was there, and then they got to experience that. Through Jesus' words, they were able to live knowing that they were living in the time of the resurrection, in the time of life. And we too can share in all of those conversations of hope and joy and life. We have that ability. We've experienced that in our lives already. Think back on the times when someone's words brought that into your life. When they brought you joy and hope, those are words that give life. Think back on all the words that have inspired you to become the person that you are, to get to where you are. Those are words that give life. We have two ways that we can use our words: the words that bring death and the words that bring life. And the words that bring life don't always have to be extravagant speeches or things like that. They can be the simplest words of encouragement and the simplest words of affirmation. I'll never forget the profound impact that words have had on my life. When I was 19 years old, I spoke in front of a church for the first time. I had just spent the summer working for my home church in Oklahoma, and I had done all of these different things in ministry, and then they asked me if I would be willing to speak at the services at the end of the summer. And I didn't really want to do it. I was 19. I was scared. It was a slightly bigger church, and I didn't know what I was doing. But I got my stuff together, and I spoke that Sunday about identity and what I'd learned about myself and how I felt like God was moving in my life and where that was leading me. And I remember being in the first service, and I was standing there, and I looked out into the crowd, and my district superintendent was there. And I didn't know that she was going to be there. I didn't even know she knew that I was speaking that day, but she was there. And so when the service was over, she came up to me and she gave me a hug, and she handed me a piece of paper, and she walked away. And on that piece of paper, it said, "I don't know what you're going to be in the future, but today you were a preacher." And her words were so encouraging to me, and her words were so affirming to me, and it gave me a sense of peace and comfort knowing that somehow, some way, God was using me that day. And it was because of her kind words that I was able to go through the next two services having a sense of peace and having a sense of hope about what I was doing. Those are the kinds of words that speak life. Other words that we can speak that speak life are words of encouragement, the ones that build us up and the ones that help us to keep going. Words of affirmation, those words that we need to hear that help us develop and understand who we are as a person and where our gifts and our abilities lie. When we affirm those things in other people, we help them to understand who they are and who they've been created to be. When we share our stories with one another, we're forming a relationship. We're letting ourselves become vulnerable to one another and opening our hearts and opening up our lives to one another so that we can grow deeper together and to have those people in our lives that we can count on and that we can trust and that we can rely on. Our words bring life when we give feedback to one another. In the same way that we can be overly critical, we can also give feedback that helps us to grow, that helps us to become better at what we're doing or better at who we are as a person. And the important thing about feedback is we can't just go up to someone and start giving them feedback without having listened first. So when we give words of life, we need to make sure that we're listening to the people around us so that our words can be helpful. Words of justice. There's so many people in the world today who are struggling and dealing with issues that are so big and so huge, and they can't speak on their own. They need people who are going to speak up for them and fight for them and to defend them. We need people to speak up for the issues like hunger and homelessness and all of those types of issues that need a voice. And we need to speak words of positivity. When we speak words of positivity, we're going to share that with the world. And positivity is what we will reap. In Proverbs 16:24, it says, "Gracious words are a honeycomb, sweet to the soul and healing to the bones." We want our words to be healing. We want to feel that throughout our whole body, to know that we are good and that the words that we're saying are good and that those are giving life to the people around us. But it's not just about the words we speak to other people. We have to be conscious of how our words are affecting ourselves. If you're speaking negatively about your situation and your life and the things that are going on, and it's so easy to do, so easy to say, "Oh, I don't like my job, I don't want to go to work today." It's so easy to build up that negativity, but that is what we spread, and that is what we will continue to feel in our lives. But if we speak the words of positivity and we speak those positive words into our lives, then we will feel hope and joy and peace, and we'll be able to live differently. Our words are such a powerful tool. And God has given those to us as a gift to spread and share with the world. But sometimes we're going to fail because we're not perfect people. We can't do it on our own. And so in order for our words to truly be life-giving, we have to return our words to the one who gave them to us. We need to refocus our life on God. We need to fill up our lives with the one who gave us words. It says in Luke 6, "A good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart, and an evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in his heart. For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of." What is your heart full of? Have you taken the time recently to let your heart be filled with God and to return your worship to God? We can use our words to praise God. Not just on Sundays, but every day of our life, to return that praise to God so that He knows how great that we think He is and how much we trust and rely on God. We need to give praise on a regular basis. We need to spend time using our words to pray to God. That's our chance to communicate with God and to let God know how our life is going and where we're struggling and where things are going well and where we need God's assistance and speaking with God and letting that conversation be open between us. And we need to take time to meditate on the Word. Generations and generations of people have looked at the scriptures that we have today, and they've grown from them, and they've had life come from them, and they've been able to become the people that God designed them to be from them. We need to take the time to focus on the words that have been given to us about God. And if we take this time to deepen our relationship with God and to really focus our hearts and our souls and our minds and our words on God, then when we do that, it's going to be so much easier for that life-giving words to flow from our hearts. It's going to become so much more natural. If we take that time to focus our lives, when we speak, our words will be filled with hope, and our words will be filled with love and joy and peace, and we will be able to give that same breath that we've been given of life to the whole world. Amen.
Amen. You can give her a hand. That's good.